Good evening, everybody. Welcome to tonight's edition of the Triangle Area SQL Server User Group's main meeting. So we have the pleasure this evening of Taiob Ali, who's going to talk to us about analyzing Azure Monitor log data for Azure resources. Before we do that, I do want to give our gracious hosts an opportunity to talk a little bit about what's going on at Tech Systems. So as I hand the microphone over, I'll do that now.
Everyone, my name is Hannah Melton. I'm a IT recruiter at Tech Systems out of the Raleigh, North Carolina office. We are a global IT staffing and services company, but we work with some big clients such as like Apple, Cisco, Red Hat. But if you have any other specific questions about the market or anything that's going on in our country regarding the market, I'd be more than happy to get on a call with you. And I know Kevin does have my contact information as well.
All right, thank you for that. And now, without further ado, Taiob, would you please take it away?
Okay, thank you, Kevin. Thank you, all the organizers. I know it's not easy after a full day of work, coming here and hosting this meeting. Plus, thanks to all of you who joined. So my goal is there is no slide to this. I did put few slides into the presentation, looking like slide or looks like slide just for logistic purposes. So we'll probably be spending about 50 minutes and then question and answer. And meantime, I know some of you are online, some of you are in the room. So Kevin is going to moderate all the questions. Stop me anytime. I'd rather answer your question than just talking by myself. So I am not going to talk about myself. There is really nothing about. I just want you to take a note of my contact. So after this presentation, once I share the material, if you want to run this by yourself, do the setup, and you have any questions or concern or something that you want to follow up with me, I follow all four of this. So you can send me messages via any of this and I'll make sure that I get back to you. I'm not going to read the abstract. I just put this for just so it's here. So the first I'll give you a little bit of premise of this talk. So the title is Azure resources. It's a broad, right? I did not narrow it down. Most of my demo or all the demos are around Azure SQL Database because I work with database. I'm primarily a database operations engineer, database administrator, whatever you call. But the way I presented this, or I made this presentation, that you can take this concept. I kept the examples very simple. My whole goal is to get the idea through, right? How this is all done. If you can master that, or if you get that understanding, then you can apply this same method to any Azure resource. Doesn't matter what it is, anything. Storage account, your Azure Data Factory, Synapse, any Azure resource. You take this concept, you can use it. This is also a pretty fast changing landscape like any other things in cloud, right? With any cloud provider. So some of the stuff are on the flight, right? Like today, what I'm showing you is still been there for for a while, and Microsoft is working something called on the database side is something called Azure SQL Insight, which is still in preview. So I'm not going to show that, but behind the scene, Azure SQL Insight also works with the same kind of resources that I'll be using today. So try to grab the concept. Even though I'm showing it with this, even if you work with other resources in Azure, you can take this and you can apply this. And stop me with any questions if I'm not clear. So throughout this presentation, I'll be using a new language called Kusto. And Kusto, if you just use this word called Kusto, different people will take it in a different way, right? Depending on what context you're talking about, because some people will say it's a Kusto engine, some people will say it's Azure Data Explorer is based on Kusto engine, and Kusto is also a new query language. So let's talk about it very briefly, because unless you get that context and I start using that language, you might get get confused. So this is totally was invented or manufactured within the Microsoft ecosystem. Microsoft needed something to monitor their own resources, like these large data centers, like these are like, like football field size, like multiple football field, right? Hundreds and thousands of servers, power, cooling, storage, network, and all that. How do Microsoft monitor all this, right? How do they know that which disks are going bad, where things are, the temperature is up? So they needed something that can ingest data very quickly, um, and they can compress it, they can index it, and they can make a uh, query it very quickly, right? So they can see where the anomalies are, where there is a deviation from the baseline. Microsoft needed that, even for their own stuff. Like if some of you play some of the games that Microsoft own or the gaming console, you know that you can play live against each other, right? So huge amount of data that they need to ingest and then they process in a very quick time. And that was the premise of this. So all of this, in our context, what I'm going to show you today, most of this data, as soon as, or all the data get ingested, they're all column store indexes, and then they're compressed and they're read-only. So one thing I'll keep talking is something called log analytics workspace, where this data get ingested from different Azure resources. They are, for us, we cannot modify that, because as soon as you start modifying, then Microsoft, then you have to recompress, you have to reindex, and then you lose the purpose of what I just said, right? You need to quickly ingest and quickly get the insight out of it. So that's kind of, where this Kusto engine or Kusto language, that came into existence. So there's some history. I'm not going to read the slide, but you can read up. I'll share this with you. The application inside, Microsoft started using this in 2016, and then 2018, Microsoft also launched another service called Azure Data Explorer. So I will show you a couple of queries writing with the Kusto Query language against. There are some clusters that are publicly available for you without any paying any money. So you can play with those. So I'll use some free clusters to show you how this thing work. But this is a service that you can buy from Microsoft, called Azure Data Explorer. If you have large data that I said, that kind of data, if you need to process, there's a whole service that you can buy, and using Microsoft's hardware and other resources, you can use it. I'm not going to read this. This is started in the Microsoft R&D in Israel, and there was some progression, and I wrote the timelines here. There are two pictures that I copied, and I put the URL here just so you know that I did not make this. These are copy pasted from the Learn website. This gives you some visual that how this thing might work. So on the left side, you can see you have all kind of resources, right? Your application OS and other Azure resources. If you want to monitor your subscription usage, all those. Primarily two kind of data, right? One is a metric, and metric is kind of, we call, like in Windows system, right? Like WMI counters, right? We call this. I want to know how much is my CPU right at this time, right? So like 639 host 1 CPU is at 60%. This is a metric. Logs is a little bit more details, right? A error message, what's going on, like a deadlock. I can say like a metric can tell me how many deadlock I had in last 1 hour, but when I go to logs, I can get a little bit more details, right? Which process was the victim, which was the winner, what was the query hash, and all I can get from the logs. So once you emit those data from the left to these two data into some kind of repository, then you can analyze on those, right? And when I say repository, in this case, you can go to storage account, event hub, log analytics workspace. All these things work, and I'll show you in the portal where you can set this up. So once you have the data ingested, Microsoft behind the scene will automatically process it, compress it, index it, and then you can write your own query. There are built-in dashboards. You can write dashboards. I'll show you some examples. You can plug it into Power BI. You can write workbooks and all kind of stuff that you can do with the data, right? And you can alert on that, which I'll show you a couple of examples. This is another thing, Microsoft call it a centralized logging. Again, I copy pasted this from here. I did not make this slide. What this gives you is an end-to-end troubleshooting experience, right? Oftentimes in old days, right, when we had our on-premises data center, you hear all the stories or jokes that we make, about system administrators, storage engineers, that, they see something that we don't see. We see something that they don't see. So now once you send everything to one place and then you extract the data from there, you can avoid some of those frictions, right? You can get all in one place and you can have one view and you can see what kind of caused the other issues, right? Where this came from and the root cause and all that. So that's pretty much. And I put some resources. I also put some some high level points like read only request and all that. But in the resources I put a Pluralsight course, which is a 4-hour course. And you do not have to have a paid account, though. As long as you have a Pluralsight account, this course is sponsored by Microsoft, so you can go. This is by an MVP. You can, that's one of the best place to start learning Kusto Query language if if you're not familiar with. And it's pretty much T-SQL. There are even learn documents that compare syntaxes between Kusto and T-SQL. That will be a good place to start. If you do not know today, because oftentimes a dashboard, yes, it's good. Give you some preset data, but if you really need to dig deeper, if you have a high transaction or SQL Server system or other resources that heavily used, and you need to really get to the bottom of a complex problem, probably you want to write some of the queries by yourself. Okay, so we talked about Kusto. I'm gonna come back to this notebook. Sorry, I forgot to say the tool that you see on the screen is called Azure Data Studio. This is written by Microsoft. It's a free tool, multi-platform. And what you are seeing on my screen is something we call notebook. A notebook is where you can put, as you saw, pictures here. You saw, you haven't seen any code yet, but I have codes in other notebooks. You can put code, comments, pictures, URLs, and all that. And then you have kernel, means what language this is going to use behind the scene. So you can have a PowerShell, Python, Kusto is a log analytics, and SQL. So you know, uh, there is uh, you can use this tool for many reasons. I mean, for many purposes. I'm not going to go into this. If you look up, if you search in YouTube or Google or even on the Learn website, there are learning modules about Azure Data Studio, and also there are a bunch of speakers talked about Notebook, how to get started with Notebook. So look at those. So the first one is setup, how to enable event logging, and which I'm going to show you. But I did some setup, and I'm not going to run this right now because it takes some time to run this. In my machine, it takes about 5 to 8 minutes. Your mileage can vary depending on which region you are using in Azure, where you are located physically, how better is your network and all that. So I put enough comment here to all of this, and this is all variable driven. If you don't like my names, you can put your own name. Of course, you have to say, your tenant and some subscription details you have to put, and then you can run all this. So I've done all this. I'm not going to go through this, right? But when you do this, if you run into any issues, then let me know. So I'll show you some of this in the portal later on. But before I do that, in the interest of time, what I'm going to do, I will run this. I've run this before, but I'm going to just show you what I'm doing here. I'm just going to create a deadlock, and there are probably thousands of examples you can find online how to create a deadlock. This is nothing too complex, very simple concept. So I'm connected to a Azure SQL server, as you can see here at the bottom. In Azure SQL database or server in PaaS model, you cannot say use database name. So I have to make sure I'm in the right database context, right? I say try SQL demo database. So I'm just going to drop this table if it exists, because I tested it a few times for today's presentation. Then I'm creating the table, 2 tables, and I'm inserting some data. That's it. So it's pretty simple, right? And now I'm going to create a deadlock purposely. As you see, I have a explicit begin transaction, but I'm not committing this. I'm going to leave this open purposely. Now I go to another window. I have another transaction that's going to be open, and one of these should deadlock, probably this one. It's taking a little longer than I expected. Interesting. Okay, so something I didn't do right. Let me try this again. Commit on both sides. Okay, it's my bad. Okay, so now I have a deadlock. So I am going to commit this, and I'm also going to drop this table. So I'll do two things. I'll show you, it takes about 7 to 8 minutes this data to get ingested and to alert me. So you'll hear my phone ringing. Also email will come, and I'll show you. Also we'll try to find these drop table statements later on using KQL. So this is one of the drawback today that Microsoft has been working over a year to release Azure SQL Insight. They know about these delays, and they know that there are certain resources in Azure that if there is an anomaly, we cannot be waiting for 7 to 8 minutes. And I think on the newer version, it's in preview right now. It's in public preview. You can try it. It's a lot faster. I also did another setup just to generate some data. I created some tables, some store procs, and I'm running this from a tool called SQL Query Stress. If you do not know it, this is an open source. Initially it was written by Adam Mechanic. Now it's in GitHub. So I'm running these to store procedures from 20 threads about 100,000 times. I started this way before this meeting started just to get some load and to show you a couple of things. Okay, so let's go back. I'm not going to come back to this anymore. We'll stay in Azure Data Studio. So I'll first show you in the portal. Through that setup query, that notebook that I showed you, it created a bunch of things. I have a resource group. Resource group is a logical container. It helps you to put things together, and how you group this, it's up to you in Azure, right? You might do it through business unit, how you do your billing. So there are, a couple of things you should think about. But the one good thing is once I'm done with this meeting, I can just go and delete this resource group, and it will delete everything. Except there are a couple of exceptions. When you do VMs, you have to, click few things to make sure those get deleted too. Now I have all these resources, and I don't want to talk about each one right now. This is going to be a waste of time. So let's look at the server that I was connecting from my management studio. And here you will see something called audits. And again, you should read about audits. And if you are using other resources, right, I said this is applicable to any resources, they might not call it. Pretty much all resources probably have an audit, but here there's something else called diagnostic settings, which I'm going to show you. Other resources might have other terms that they use, but the concept is same. Once you set it up, it will go to a log analytics workspace. So here, as you can see, I have a log analytics workspace which I'll show you a few minutes later. So all this data is going there. So, but I could also choose the storage account instead of log analytics, or I could have chosen both, or I can also send it to the event hub. And now there are some third-party tools that also can ingest this data. I'm not going to get there. I'm just going to show you the native tools. And there is also something called the ledger for auditing, which you can look up if you have sensitive data in a table that you absolutely have to prove to your clients or your customers that data hasn't been tampered with. You can use this. So this is one way, this is one setup. And now under this server, I also have a database that I just showed you for the deadlock demo, right? In this database, I have something set up called diagnostic settings. And if I go to the details of this, there are some groups. I can say send all logs or just the audit data. And I can also pick and choose what I want to send. I just choose everything because this is for a demo. I'm not going to keep it for a long term. In Azure SQL Insight, in the newer version, you have a better control of grouping these things than this. Here again, I'm sending it to Log Analytics Workspace. I could have sent it to Storage Account, Event Hub, or I could send it to a partner solution. Right? Any question on this?
No questions so far, but chat, if you do have any questions, get them in and I will ask away.
Sure. So now I showed you all this data is going to the Log Analytics Workspace, right? So what's happening there? What does this mean by saying that it's going to a Log Analytics Workspace? So let's go and see this, right? Log Analytics Workspace, right? So this is the repository that I was talking about. This is where all the data is coming. And I'm speaking very loosely. Don't hold me on this because we are database professionals, especially myself and maybe some of you. It just makes easier for us to understand, right? So if you compare this like as a database and then these are your tables, right? But Microsoft wouldn't call this. They would kill me if they hear this. So if I'm saying this, and all this has what kind of data type, as you can see, string, int, and these all will be more probably denormalized in Azure SQL Insight. So this data is being ingested here automatically because of our setup, and then they are being column store indexed, compressed, and all that, and ready for ready for our use. Now Microsoft also, as I said, this thing is going to go away once Azure SQL Insight probably go into the into GA, but there are some solutions, and I'm sure some of these will be carried over to the new system. So without you and me doing anything, as we set up this data ingestion, Microsoft behind the scene take this data and create some dashboards for us, do some aggregation. So that saves you from writing raw Kusto Query language. So if I reduce this, I don't know, say like last 30 minutes. And I'm not going to go through all this, right? That's not the point here. So when you do this for other resources, different kind of resources have different kind of solution. For us, because this is a database, as you can see, all the word types, blocking, deadlocks, all kind of stuff here. CPU, IO, log IO. Log IO is very important. I'm hammering this by controlling your amount of log that you can generate. That is the only way Microsoft can meet their SLA or keep their SLA. So this is important. You might often see your database are slow because you are hitting this limit. So anyway, I'm not going to, but these are built-in solutions that that is available to you. There's also something called workbooks that I talked about before. So I I don't know if I say created one, that'll probably be not a correct statement, because I put this in the, when you go to the setup notebook, you will see I copied it from an open source um, that I just copy pasted just for the show you. So you can create your own dashboard if you want to. If you have thousands of this, um, you can create the dashboard as long as all the data is coming here, it will aggregate and show you. So it's all color coded. If it's under the limit, it is giving you in color, green, red, whatever. So all I'm trying to say, you can also write your own workbook, and then of course I'll show you a lot of demo how you can do this with the raw Kusto Query language. Okay, so in the abstract I showed you this. Now let's look at some raw query, right? Consume data with KQL. So this is a Kusto Query language. I'm going to take this. We can also run this from here. I'll show you later on. I have sections for that. I want to show you in Portal. So I'm going to minimize some of this to get some more space here. F11 gets you to full screen, I believe. Yeah. Okay. And minimize some of this. And I have a total separate talk how to get started with Kusto Query language, where I go from one line code to some complex joins and stuff. So we don't have time here, but I try to put some comments so when you run this, you have some idea. So this is a table, Azure metrics, and then we are putting some, we're filtering this data. I know using bunch of while statement in one batch is kind of weird, but here you can do that. And then this is kind of group by and order by and all this. So like I said, we do not have time to go through the syntaxes.
So there's a question that came in chat while you're waiting
Yeah.
for that query to finish.
Sure.
Given all these metrics and different keywords in the dashboards that you were just showing, is there any ability to do unit testing on this query creation, or is it just build it up as you go along and that's all you get for testing?
Yeah, I mean, I normally, so unit test just to write the query you are saying, or for a workload? I'm sorry.
Yeah, so unit testing that the query that you're writing is the query that you expect to generate. Like, it's not necessarily the results from your data, because that would be more of an integration test, but rather that you're doing the thing that you expect to do versus
No.
getting the results you expect to get.
Yeah, like in PowerShell, we can do like, Pastor and all those. I haven't seen anything with the KQL. So it's probably as you write, and you have to know what you're looking for. One good thing here that you can do, if you see this thing got changed, set in query, right? Because I'm only looking at last 15 minutes. If I just highlighted this, it automatically give you a 24-hour by default. And this got me at the beginning. I got caught a few times. Even if you do group by, it will just do group by on your last 24 hours data. So probably a smaller set of data. I do not know any way to really, like you can do with some of your partial code. Um, that you can write your own test, and you can always make sure that you're getting what you want. I do not know. I haven't seen anything. So we saw a deadlock that we created. I'm not sure if it's here already, but I'm looking at for last 2 hours. So I did a test before the meeting started, and we'll probably look at the first one. Yeah, so the latest one hasn't come through yet. And I talked about the log write percent. So if we look at the last 60 minutes, yeah, so we reached maximum 100 because I'm kind of hammering this, and I'm trying to from 20 thread as much load as I can put. So this is definitely getting kept by Microsoft behind the scene. So there are other ones, right? You can see wait stats and who dropped my table, right? I talked about. So it should show something that because I did that query before we came online. Yeah. So as you can see, you get a little bit more details, what time your table got dropped, who ran this, and what statement was run, right? So some of these you will not probably get from a dashboard, and that's why I said, right, if you really need to get insight, some data that you need, you probably want to start looking at KQL if if Azure is your cloud provider. Okay, so this is pretty much how do you consume data once you enable logging, right? So hopefully I answered that question. There are many ways, and we'll see a few more options. So I created that deadlock, and I'm not saying that for each deadlock you want to get alerted. It's up to you, but I'm just taking this, as I said, I'm keeping the examples very basic just so you can get the concept, right? So how would I get alerted with this deadlock? If I want to get alerted, right? And you can use this concept for long running queries, blocking, whatnot, like whatever you need. So if you go to alerts, and if you go to alert rules, and why would you do it this way, right? Because this is the only way you can scale this. You can do it for each database separately. But then if you have hundreds and thousands of these, are you going to set this up every time? No. So if you have a couple of different log analytics workspace based on your tier of your app, then if these are all belongs to the same group, you set up the alert once, and doesn't matter if you're sending this data from one database or from 1000 database, you do not have to do the work again. So here I have an alert rule called found deadlock alert. And if I click this, right, it gives you a little bit more details. I have a condition. It says if there is more than 0 rows, means even just for one, alert me. And I have a very simple Kusto query here that doesn't give you any details, but in my notebooks, which I'll show you later on, I have more complex queries about deadlocks that if you want to get more details, you can put this here. Now, once it finds that there is a deadlock or the table rows is more than 0, how would I know that this happened? And I'm not going to sit in front of a computer 24/7. That's not the goal of automation. So I have something called a action group called notify DBA deadlock. And in the action, I have an email, a voicemail, and a SMS message. I'm not saying that you do this. I just did this for demo purpose. So if I go to action groups, and I can, once I create action group, I can use it for many alerts. So this is my real phone number, of course. Once I put in GitHub, I probably mask this. Email, the whole world knows my email. So once you set this up, and this is all done by PowerShell code in the setup file that I showed you here. You can, once you go through this, you will see how to set this up. I did not do this from GUI, so I can do this in as many places as I need consistently. When you set this up, you can also test it. This is a pretty new feature. This was not there before. I don't know, you can just pick anything, and if you say test, this is also going to send me a test email, phone call, and an SMS message to make sure that your action group is, as you hear, my phone is ringing, right? Yep. SMS failed. I do not know why it failed, but I can take a look later on. And yeah, so I'm going to close this. So this is the way you can set up alerts, right? As I said, if I go to a database itself, you can also set it up from here, but you are setting it up just for one database, which you do not want because you cannot, you have to do this every time. So what else we have here? Okay, we did test it. So let's look at some baseline KQL. So there's another file that I want to show you. Anytime you want to alert, right? This is DBA lesson 101, right? You want to know your baseline, right? And there are many ways to do your baselining. How do you do this? It's up to you. But if you do not know your baseline, it's hard to know when things are not in accordance with the way you want, right? So you always want to baseline your stuff. So if I want to know I don't know, like my average CPU for last 60 minutes, and then now if you know your baseline, you can compare with this and you can decide if you want to generate alert or no. Same with the log rate percent. We've seen some of this already. There's a nice thing called slicer in KQL that will take you 2 hours of data and then slice it by every 5 minutes. And then I'll show you something here that's built in. You can create a chart right here and see the data, right? And if you think, I can't find where, it started. Okay, so this is, one is from my deadlock test and one is from the alert test. So, okay, so I'm just going to mute that. Now, if you think the 5 minute is not enough, you can just change this to a 2-minute slicer and you can run this again. And so it's give you a better, so it's you can increase or decrease the granularity if you want to. This is a nice function they have. So I'm not going to run all this, but you get the concept. So if you know your baseline, you can write this kind of query, and then you can set up your alert based on the threshold and set up your action group, right? On some stuff, and I only showed you like a email, a text, or a phone call, right? But this is actually more powerful than that. You can actually have a webhook. You can send messages direct to your Teams chat or to your Teams group. You can call a Azure function. You can also run notebooks from Azure Automation. So these are all individual services that you can call other services. Like one of the perfect scenario is, right, if you want to scale up or scale down your resources, right? So like you have a Azure SQL Database that your business, when your business are going to get more traffic. Before that, you want to scale up, and then once you're done, you can scale down, right? If you want to do that kind of thing to be cost effective, you can just have an alert when you know what threshold to, if it breaches, automatically call a Azure function, or you can call, and there are other things that you can call through this, not just, just call your thing. You can automate the whole thing end to end. It will automatically go and scale up for yourself or scale down when, when your traffic is down. So you can do all that. Okay, so how do you consume this data from a notebook, right? If you do not want to go to the portal the way I showed you, or you want to write a whole notebook like this and keep it handy, that if you have a issue or if you're seeing some problem, your team can run this notebook, save the result, and you can analyze it later on. Because one of the advantage of the notebooks is that you can run a notebook, and with the results you can save it with a different name, right? And then later on, when the crisis is over, you can go and look at it, right, or what it was before you made any changes, right, or what caused the issue. So you can do this. And this whole thing that I'm going to show you, it went through some progression, right? So today I'll probably be using the last two, right? I'm not going to use, for my purpose, I'm not going to go use this. But if you have the service called Azure Data Explorer, some of this, you also probably be, useful to you, right? So I will start with the KQL magic, and this is the first one that Microsoft released. So this is actually a Python kernel, even though you are using KQL. When this came out, there was no Azure Data Explorer or Kusto kernel available. So this was a Python kernel, and then you had to, use the the KQL to tell that, I'm writing a KQL in the Python kernel. So I have done the install. I loaded it, and as you can see that I'm using a cluster name help and the database name samples, right? So this is a Azure Data Explorer, nothing to do with the log analytics from the database that I showed you. This is a free cluster that you can use. Um, and once you have your cluster name set up and you have a connections established, then you can do pretty much, the same way that I showed you, your table name or your repository name, and then, you do whatever you want to, right? Where summarize order by. So as you can see all this, come on, yeah, okay. So you see all this data that we can pull into a notebook, and we can save this, with the data, right? I'm just going to delete this data so I don't have to scroll through all the way. And then you can also do some charting even within the notebook, right? You can say render column chart. That way, like in the GUI, I showed you that you can click the button for chart. Instead of clicking, you can straight, do a chart and save it or send it to someone if you need to. So when this thing was first launched a couple of years ago, I'm not going to run this. You can run some of this by yourself. You can even actually data frame in Python. I know Kevin is expert in Python area, but I'm not. But if you are, you can actually combine these two. So I can have a data frame, and then I can use it in the next one. So yeah, so again, this is my my attempt of showing that I know a little bit of Python. So now I'm using the Texas in this here. So it is just going to show you the data for Texas. I hope Kevin is not laughing at me. So, so when this thing first came out, Microsoft will allow your personal account to be used because you can get your. So let me go back to our log analytics workspace. Has something called workspace ID right here. And we could create a connection to the workspace ID, and then we could actually query using KQL magic like the way I did from the portal. And recently they stopped it. I put a, I think I listed it here. If you go here, I opened it, but Microsoft actually limited this to work account and business account. So I'm not going to show you this because now there are better tools to do this. So after KQL Magic, Microsoft launched something called KQL extension. So which I did not tell you before, Azure Data Studio or Visual Studio Code, they are very lightweight tool when you install by default. If you need to do more complex stuff or some stuff that doesn't come by default, you can load extensions. There are hundreds and hundreds of, I'm not going to go through, you can look it up. So you can enable extension, you can disable it when you do not need. So that kind of enrich this, these tools that you can do many things. So then there was a, KQL extension came out. And again, with the KQL extension, what you can do now, initially when Azure Data Studio came out, here you could only connect to Microsoft SQL Server. And now there are more. One is the Kusto, and one is directly to the Azure Monitor Logs, which this one I'll show you, but now I'm using this one. So I can connect to a cluster. And here I'm connecting to a, like as I said, I'm connecting to a free cluster that is available from Microsoft to use. And once I do that, I can run these queries that I've been showing you. Now here also, there is a cumbersome way to connect directly to our log analytics workspace. If you see that here, TRISQLWS database, and this is my resource group, and this is my subscription. Problem is that I cannot connect once and keep using that connection string. So I have to write this every time I want to query my log analytics workspace from this notebook, which is again, not ideal, right? Yep. So as you can see, now I'm pulling this data directly from this log analytics workspace. But again, for each one, I have to, have this long connection string set up. So you can run this by yourself if you're interested. So recently, this is the latest and greatest is the Azure Monitor Log extension. Before I show you this, there is another thing that people have been asking for a while, and Microsoft finally made this happen. If you, from your server pane, from your connection pane, if you're connected to your Azure SQL account, you can actually connect here and you can see all your Azure resources. I should be seeing my, oh, sorry, the first one, my log analytics workspace, and this is the one that we've been working with now. I can actually, like SSMS, we've been, used to, I can just say new query. And if I, copy paste one of these queries from here, and I can bring it here, I can just run this. Right? So this is pretty neat. We didn't have this before. You have to go through many hoops if you're trying to use any tool other than the portal. And Azure Monitor Log extension is the latest one. Again, I just have to set my connection string from here one time with my workspace ID, my account. And once I'm connected, that's it. I do not have to do anything else. I can keep running the queries that I showed you so far. So I wrote a bunch of stuff here to give you some context and how do you set this up and all that. But then we can just run it like any other any other notebook, like a T-SQL PowerShell. We can have our query, we can have these results, and we can save it for later on to look at it. Or your team can have a notebook that in case of crisis you all look at it at the same way. So I showed you deadlock, but I said I have queries that will give you a little bit more details about deadlock. This one does not, sorry. Yeah, this should give us the deadlock XML also, right? So here I can get a little bit more details about my deadlock. You can also find the query hash, for the deadlock that was caused. And there are there are some other stuff, like if you want to look at error event, we talked about the drop table, who dropped my table. You can see here about more details of this. Yeah, so we are at about 50-minute mark, so I am going to okay. Yeah, so I have put bunch of these references, and you can go through this. If you want to get to a little bit more detail, there is a SQL to Kusto cheat sheet, and here is my contacts again. So I will stop here, and thank you again. So I'll take questions, comments, or any question you have. I will refresh this in my GitHub repo, and hopefully by tomorrow I'll send a link to Kevin, and then you can all download all these resources I'll share with you.
Excellent. And let me see if there are any questions. None in chat. Any? Looks like no questions. I think you did a great job of giving us that overview, giving us a minimal dive on KQL and some of the interesting things that we can do around alerting. So very well done. Thank you.
You're welcome. So yes, once you download this, I know you might not have a question now. Once you play with this, if you get stuck, any question, comments, please do contact me in any of this way, and I'll try to help to my best.
Excellent. And from chat, we're saying amazing presentation, learned a lot, thank you. And that was great. So much appreciated. And we are going to wind things down for this evening. Thank you again, Taiob, for a great presentation. Remember, everybody, our next meeting will be online only. This one is our final business intelligence and data science meeting of the year. Rick Pack is going to talk to us about a Kaggle competition that he has been working on. And that's going to finish us up for the month of October. We'll have more things. All of this is at meetup.com/trypass. And until we see each other in some future meeting, everyone, take care.
Thank you. Bye.